The ice moon of Vareth 7 had never known mercy, and today was no exception. Ranger Eli Cross pressed forward through the howling blizzard, his thermal suit groaning under the assault of winds that could strip flesh from bone in minutes. The distress beacon had been faint, almost lost in the electromagnetic chaos of the storm, but it was there. Someone needed help. Something needed help. The Galactic Frontier Corps had trained him for this. Humans, they said, were peculiar among the starfaring species. Most alien races had evolved on worlds of moderate temperament, where survival meant cooperation and technology. Humanity had clawed its way up from a death world, where winter could kill as surely as any predator. That made humans valuable. That made them rangers. Eli's heads-up display flickered, and through the white curtain of snow he saw them. 5 shapes huddled against the base of an ice cliff, small and trembling. As he approached, his heart sank. Kethar cubs. Their blue-silver fur, usually so lustrous, was matted with ice. Their large eyes, evolved for the dim light of their homeworld, blinked up at him with a mixture of hope and terror. "Easy now," Eli said, his voice crackling through the suit's external speakers. He knew they couldn't understand English, but tone was universal. The largest cub, barely the size of a terrier, hissed weakly. Protective instinct even in the face of death. Eli respected that. His scanner swept over them. No parents. No ship nearby. The beacon was coming from a crashed shuttle half buried in the ice 200 meters away. He checked the cub's vitals, hypothermia, advanced stages. They had maybe an hour, perhaps less. The smallest cub, her identification tag reading Nara, wasn't even shivering anymore. That was bad. That was the body giving up. Not on my watch, Eli muttered. He activated his emergency beacon, but the response was immediate and devastating. The storm had intensified. No rescue shuttle could fly in these conditions. Evac was 12 hours minimum. These cubs didn't have 12 hours. Most species would have calculated the odds, filed a report, marked the coordinates for body recovery. The Kethar themselves, for all their technological prowess, would have accepted this as the cruel arithmetic of the universe. But Eli was human, and humans were fundamentally, perhaps dangerously, irrational when it came to the young. He dropped his pack and began to work. The ice cliff formed a natural alcove, but it wasn't enough. The wind still tore through, and the ground was a thermal sink that would drain what little heat the cubs had left. Eli pulled out his emergency shelter, a reflective sheet designed for one human. It would have to do. He used his cutting laser to carve a deeper hollow into the ice, working with speed born of desperation. His suit's heating elements were already working overtime, but he diverted additional power, accepting the risk. Then he laid out the thermal sheet, creating a tent-like structure anchored with pythons driven deep into the ice. The cubs watched with confused, dimming eyes as this strange two-legged creature built them a refuge. Once the basic structure was complete, Eli faced the hardest decision. His suit could generate heat, but not enough for 6 bodies in these conditions. The cubs needed direct warmth. They needed body heat. Without hesitation, Eli began to remove his thermal suit. His AI assistant immediately protested. Warning: external temperature minus 47 degrees Celsius. Wind chill minus 73. Survival time without thermal protection 4 to 6 minutes. Noted, Eli said, stripping down to his base layer. Override safety protocols. Emergency rescue operation. He gathered the cubs, their small bodies stiff with cold, and pulled them into the shelter. Then he wrapped himself around them, the thermal sheet cocooning them all. His body heat, that ancient mammalian gift, began to radiate outward. Cub Nara was pressed against his chest, so small and still. Eli could feel her heartbeat, faint and irregular. He cupped his hands around her, breathing warm air over her tiny form. "Come on, little one," he whispered. "Stay with me." The other cubs began to press closer, instinct drawing them to warmth. Eli felt the cold seeping into his own bones, felt his fingers going numb. His AI was screaming warnings, painting his vision with red alerts. Core temperature dropping, tissue damage imminent. But beneath his hands, Nara stirred, her heart rate was strengthening. The other cubs were shivering again, a good sign, their bodies remembering how to fight. Eli activated his suit's emergency heat packs, crushing them and tucking them around the cubs. It wasn't enough to warm himself, but it would help them. Time became meaningless. Eli drifted in and out of awareness, holding the cubs close, his body a furnace burning its last reserves. He thought of Earth, of snowstorms in the Rockies, of his grandfather teaching him to build shelters. Humans had survived ice ages. He could survive this. Nara's eyes opened. They were bright again, alert. She made a small chirping sound and nuzzled against his hand. Eli smiled through chattering teeth. That's my girl. When the rescue shuttle finally descended 12 hours later, the med team found a scene that would be discussed across Kithar space for generations. A human ranger, his lips blue and his body trembling with severe hypothermia, sat surrounded by 5 healthy cubs. They were grooming him, keeping him warm in return, their small bodies pressed against his in a purring bundle. Cub Nara sat on his shoulder, refusing to move even as the medics approached. The Kithar ambassador would later stand before the Galactic Council and speak of humanity's strange, illogical courage. How a human had calculated the odds and decided that math was less important than compassion. How Ranger Eli Cross had proven what the galaxy was still learning. Humans didn't just survive the cold. They made warmth where there was none. They built shelters in the storm. They gave heat even when it meant freezing themselves. And perhaps most remarkably, they looked at cubs of another species and saw only children who needed saving. Nara would grow up to become a Frontier Corps Ranger herself, the first Kithar to join the human-founded organization. She wore a small patch on her uniform, a symbol she designed herself, a human hand sheltering 5 small stars. When asked why she chose such a dangerous profession, she would touch the patch and say simply, "I learned from the best. Humans taught me that family isn't about species. It's about who you'll brave the blizzard for." Ranger Eli Cross recovered fully, though he would always run a bit colder than before. He never spoke much about that day on Varath 7, but on his wall hung a picture, 5 Kithar cubs, grown and healthy, standing with the human who'd refused to let them die. Humanity, fuck yeah indeed.